house, Cherokee of Northeast Alabama.
Right.
When I say Columbus Day, what does that mean to you? How does that make you feel?
That is such a great question. When I feel it, I feel it when you say it. It almost feels like I'm being squashed. Isn't that interesting? No one has ever asked me that before. But when you said it, I felt it. There's a physical oppression. And what's interesting is it has nothing to do with anyone who's Italian. It's not against anything like that. It has to do with the residual hurt of generations of oh my gosh, colonialization, of mass murder, of disease, all those. That's what comes up in at least in my mind, and actually physically. I feel that when you say Columbus Day. It doesn't feel good. It feels like there's a celebration of your pain, is what it feels like.
Yeah. It's a very strong reaction.
It is. And I'm as surprised as you are, because no one ever asked me before.
Yeah.
And I'm just telling you what actually really happened when you said Columbus Day. I almost feel nervous. When you say, that's an interesting reaction too. Like somebody's coming to get you, or wow. I do want to know if anyone else feels that way when they hear that.
Yeah.
So of course the opposite, when you hear a celebration of your culture, and then it becomes a happy kind of celebration. This I was thinking about this because I knew we were going to talk about it. And what I understand is that really during the Revolutionary War, the country was looking for somebody as a hero that wasn't British. They needed somebody, and that's kind of the revitalization of the story of Columbus. And then it ramped up in the 1800s, and then in the 1930s, then this became an official day. But by then, the myth, the legend, right, had started. And the truth of the matter is, there's one thing historians can't agree on, is that Columbus was never, ever on the mainland of the United States. He was in the islands in the Bahamas. And that there was an indigenous tribe there, and they welcomed him. And he kind of surveyed all of that, went back, got an additional, I want to say about 15 to 17 ships, came back to get the people as slaves and to get the gold. But the people didn't know what he was talking about. And so then that's when the extermination of those people, not only through mass murder, but through disease. And before, I'd say maybe 2 years after he arrived, there's only like 200 to 300 people left out of all of those people. So for us, it's a celebration of mass genocide. It's not a story. You can't discover somewhere that people already are. And of course, we like to tell funny jokes, You go somewhere, it's like knocking on somebody's door and saying, I found this house. It's mine. I claim it for me. So the whole story of discovering the Americas and all that, well, he discovered it for his people, but he didn't discover it. We've already been here all this time. So that's the problem with the Columbus Day. But like I said, I think there should absolutely be a celebration of all things Italian. That'd be wonderful. Especially food.
National Pasta Day, maybe.
That sounds so good. So that's what the problem is the celebration of genocide. Mm-hmm. And then the reminders of all that. And Here's something I've been pondering, especially in the climate we're all living in now. This is not canceling a story. It's actually refining a story. The more we learn, hopefully the better human beings we become. And if we find out that a myth, a story wasn't exactly true, I think we have a responsibility then to change the story and make it right so that we are all on the same page. So I don't think anybody's canceling the story of Columbus. We're just trying to get to the truth of what really happened, and that's what really happened.
I think you kind of touched on it, but the question was like a lot of non-natives were taught like a romantic narrative about Christopher Columbus. And what like I was just interested on what are some of the common misconceptions with that narrative.
Okay. Um, the things that we know now is that Columbus actually thought the world was shaped like a pear, not because sometimes part of the narrative is he discovered that the world was round. Well, he never thought the world was round. It was a pear, and he was going to go on the smaller part of the top, of course, to get spices, which is what everybody wanted right at that time. And even the king and queen that gave him the money didn't really have big hopes for him to find anything, but they gave him a minimal amount of money to go. Now, here's where we get into interesting parts of the narrative of what is true and what isn't true. And I've even heard historians talk about this. Did he think he made it to India? A lot of historians now think he was perfectly aware that he wasn't there. Other people argue that he did think he was in India, and hence the name Indians. But the word Indios is what he was saying, actually means people of the sun, which think of the Bahamas. They were the people of the sun, right? And that's where the whole Indian thing started for Native America. And then part of the romantic imagery is the opening of the new world for what they consider themselves the dominant culture. So if you're in the culture and you're learning this story, I think, of course, that gives you some sense of power, maybe, and power in the narrative for yourself. That we at this point in the story, we get into the whole manifest destiny idea that it is your godly right to have dominion over these lesser people, the wildlife, all of that. If you think that, then you will go along with that story. Of course, conveniently, as kids, when we're taught this story, and some kids are still taught this story, they leave out that these were real human beings with real families, culture, music, dance, and that culture was willfully destroyed for the greed and benefit of a whole nother group of human beings. So, I try to put myself back when I was in grade school. Imagine how confusing that was, um, to be the only kid in the room who was Native and hearing that story at the same time. I'm sure you could find a lot of people that had that experience. So I guess what the culture, how I read it when they brought Columbus up again, he was kind of forgotten for a long time, was they needed a story like that of power. And think of they're in the revolution. This is our place. We found it. We're going to fight for it. They needed that Columbus myth at that point in history to help themselves psychologically. That's how I see it.
Why is still celebrating it as Columbus Day? Why is that still harmful?
The predominant culture, where we are and where we live, gives very little voice to the Native communities. You know, even when people are talking about minorities, if you want to use that word, Native doesn't normally come up. Start watching the news and listening to dialogues about race and culture, and it will normally go like African American, Asian, Latina, and it keeps going, but it never ever gets to, hardly ever anyone says Native Americans. We're that marginalized that we tend not to even come up. And I think what that is the loss of culture. And it starts because the Europeans, when they came over, of course, were starting on the East Coast and then worked their way across the country. Just like the wildlife, Native Americans were pushed into corners, into tiny little pockets, and pushed across the country. And I like to tell people when I'm talking about this that in Ohio, the elk that are out here where I live in Montana in Yellowstone were twice as big as the ones that are in Yellowstone. That was in Ohio. And the Ohio River was so crystal blue that you could see 50 feet down it. As all of that changed, so did Native culture. And as we were thrown to the side, there went our history. That's why I believe that the further east you get, the more erased our culture is in the predominant culture, not for us. We know what happened, and there are plenty of fabulous museums like the Idol York, where you can learn all this. But I think the story is more buried depending on when first European contact was made. That makes sense. I think that's why here in Montana, we have a bit more of a dialogue. I'm not telling you it's better in any way as far as relations between cultures, but there is a dialogue. So we have our state has American Indian Heritage Day. We have that. We have Indian Education for All, which is a state mandate that the kids have to be taught so much Native American history. So that's how our kids get to hear the Columbus story here. So you know what I have found? It is up to the teachers. It always is, but it is up to individual teachers to figure it out. And it's not easy on them. They're scared. And, when I talk to educators on the subject of Indian Education for All, they tell me how frightened they are. They're frightened of saying the wrong thing, of giving the wrong history, of doing something wrong. So that's why I think that the story of Columbus is hard for teachers to even to approach, because how's the kids going to react? How are the parents going to react? What if they say the wrong thing? Like I said earlier to you, I think it's important that a respectful intent to any question.
So when we say Indigenous Peoples Day, how do you feel and what does that mean?
Like suddenly there's a place and a voice. You're not buried under everything else. You can tell a story and maybe people would be interested to hear the story, be it a big story of Native America or even your personal story. So to me, when I hear that, all of a sudden it's hope and a chance to talk about a subject. This actually, if I have it right, I'm pretty sure I do. Indigenous People Day started in Berkeley in 1992. Of course, get it, 1992. And I remember it started there, but now it's 7 or 8 states. It's official to have Indigenous People Day, and then many cities, including my own, including Bozeman, where there's talks and panels like at the university talking about different contemporary subjects, including this year talking about missing, murdered Indigenous women, which is a horrible problem for us across the country. So for Indigenous Peoples Day, to me, it's the chance finally to talk a little bit about, everyone has their story, but to talk a little bit about the culture. And once again, we are so diverse. The all native tribe, there's so many details that are different. There are some generalizations, but mostly it's a wonderful, diverse culture, and not the same. I'll give you an example. I often, not once in a while, often, when a group wants to do something with Native Americans, they immediately want to put a dream catcher on it. And that is a very specific one tribe thing. That's not it does not translate across all Native. You see what I'm saying? There's certain symbols that don't work for every single tribe. My people wore cotton clothes because we were from the Southeast. We weren't in all, not that we never were, but we weren't in all leathers and all that. And I have found as I travel the country that the majority of the population equates Plains Indians with all Native Americans. It has something to do with horses and colorful beads and that is all beautiful and wonderful, but we're more than that. Yeah. And this is the day that we get to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, and to that point, I want to bring up that there are 574 federally recognized tribes. So that's not including the state
recognized tribes, right?
Or ones that are not even recognized at all by a government agency. So,
right,
that's one of the most, that S at the end of Indigenous Peoples Day is a really big thing that I don't want anyone to overlook.
Right. And there's just some basic things that the most adults don't know. Tribal identification cards being one of them. It's a federal offense to say that you're Native, you're doing a Native show and you're not enrolled. You have to, and there are people that don't understand what enrolled means. You don't get to go sign up. You have, there has to be a blood quantum. And I've told you this before, the 3 things in this country that you have to prove how much blood you have is show dogs, racehorses, and Native Americans. No other race in this country has to prove that they are what they are. And then you have a whole group of people that will argue that's to protect Native Americans. And then you have another group that, we all have numbers. We have, it's the first thing you have to show. If you're going to do anything, go to college, get tribal health, enter an art show. The first thing you have to prove is that you are enrolled, in a tribe. And Indigenous People Day is a day to talk about that too. We get into identity for Indigenous People Day, right? How I want to say this is tribes are sovereign and they get to decide the blood quantum. If they decide to change the blood quantum, make it higher, there would be a whole group of people that are no longer in the tribe anymore. So if you're raised your whole life and then suddenly you're not, and you're not enrolled anymore, and I actually know people this happened to. And for one of them, it only happened 2 years ago. Whole life is gone. Your whole self-identity is gone. I know there's people out there right now that like to make fun of how you self-identify. Well, this is a real thing. right? This is real. And if somebody who's, now 50 years old, 40 years old, who spent their whole life being part of the culture, being part of a particular land, all that, and now you're just kicked out. I don't know. If somebody wants to correct me, go right ahead. But I don't know any other culture or race in this country where somebody can just tell you you're done. You're done. You're not part of this anymore. Goodbye. Yeah. Yeah, that is painful for me to even think about, for the people that I've seen go through this.
I can't imagine, because I don't.
No.
I mean, that's who you are.
That's the essence of who you are.
Right.
That's how you see the world. We all do this.
Mm-hmm.
It can be by state, it can be by race, it can be by gender. It can be, there's a million things we can break us all down into, but it is how you look outward into the world, and to have somebody challenge you on that and tell you no, you're not. This happens in our culture, in Native American culture anyway, because there's discussions about, I one time gave a lecture that was called "I'm More Indianer Than You," and it was talking to ourselves about, I'm lighter skin, you're darker skin. You grew up on the reservation. I grew up in the city. Does that make you? The whole idea of self-identity, and then of course, if you don't look like, and usually it's Plains Indian, if you don't look like that, people feel like they can say anything. I'll just say that. They feel like they can say anything to you. And and we've almost everybody that I know who's Native has had an experience with that. This is all that comes up when you have this is why it's important to have Indigenous People Day, because you don't always get a chance to talk about these things. But I hate to use the word showcase, but it is a one day set aside that we can bring up these subjects, be they painful or not, but bring them up. So how are we going to deal with them if we don't even know they exist?
Yeah.
These things, right?
Right. And I don't know how we move forward unless we have dialogue.
Right.
Have knowledge.
It's never going to end if we don't talk about it.
Exactly.
And you know what? And you get afraid too. We've said this 4 times today, but we got to clarify it that I'm only talking for myself. I'm just telling you my life experience. That doesn't mean it's going to be the next guy's or the next guy's experience, but it's mine.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then from your point of view, how should Indigenous Peoples Day be celebrated? In what ways can Indigenous Peoples Day be celebrated by the average American?
The average person, right? Oh my gosh, if I had my way, we'd have wonderful discussions where you could ask anything without fear of saying the wrong thing, and then and then from the other side, from the Native side, there's ways of explaining to people why something is inappropriate. Let me back up and tell you this. On Facebook, there was a discussion about, should non-natives be painting natives in all of these Western art shows? Boy, did that get heated really, really fast. Because we could, talk about a good debate. We can really talk about this. What the Native community was trying to tell this these cowboy artists, and that's how they identified themselves as cowboy artists, was if you continue to depict natives in full regalia from the 1880s, we can't be real people. Because if I then just talk about me, not anybody else, if I go to give a lecture, people are like, well, she's not native because I don't look like that picture from 1880s. And so the discussion became, why can't I paint whatever I want from the cowboy artist? And then somebody pulled me in the discussion, which I tried to stay out of for a long time. I finally went in and I said this. When a group of people tell you, I'm trying not to get into specifics of what this one guy said, but you'll know what I'm saying here. If a group of people tell you that what you're saying is racist, homophobic, ageism, whatever it is, then it is. Follow me? If the group you're talking about is not your group and that group tells you no, but then you get a choice. The guy said back to me, well, I don't have to stop saying or doing this. I said, no, you don't have to. It's a free world. But now you're doing it with your full conscience that we've told you it's inappropriate. But yes, of course you can go on and do it. I don't even know how I got on all this. But this idea of culture on Indigenous People Day, that's another time, especially if you're in an institute like you are, an institution like you are, where there's art involved. You know, don't you think that'd be healthy to have a conversation about imagery? Because one can also argue that an artist should be able to paint whatever they want. There's an argument for that. The problem can be that I have seen people paint teepees with 3 different tribe symbols on them. So it's not correct. But if you know the culture, do you have a right to paint it? And guess what? I don't know. I don't know the answer to this, but I would love to see a vigorous discussion. I've had these discussions in private with people on board, board of directors at big museums or a dinner party or whatever. But I'd love to see on one of these Indigenous days at a major museum. I think it'd be incredible to have a discussion on the power of art and imagery and culture together. I want to share with everybody one of the funniest things, because, listen to what I'm asking. Do Native Americans have iPhones? And you know what, everybody else?
No. Everyone in the room.
And then, of course, you know what I do. Really? Because we're history. We're not alive right now. I don't know how, other than bringing people in, let's go, what we're talking about today, Indigenous Peoples Day, to see faces alive today, right? What I try to explain is you can be part of a culture and you can be alive right now. Everybody understands this. If you just look into yourself right now, we're in the midst of a lot of Jewish holidays this time of year. You most certainly can honor those and celebrate those. And when those days are over, if we didn't have COVID, you can go to the movies, and everybody's walking in different cultures. Even people tell me, well, we don't really have anything. Well, you do, because human beings crave celebration and remembrance and all that. And that's why things like Halloween have become just huge, because there it is. There's your culture. There's your way to celebrate with everybody. We just love ceremony. Human beings love ceremony. So you can understand what I'm saying, that you can wear your regalia to power on Saturday, right? And then be designing a new website on Sunday. Because we're alive now. We're not just history, but it is true, isn't it? You say, when I say, what do you think when you hear Native American? People immediately, the first thing they usually scream is teepees, which I get it. But we didn't all live in teepees, most certainly. Not that they're not cool, because they are, but white people never lived in teepees. So yeah, that's a problem that we really need to address on this Indigenous Peoples Day, is to see people alive right now.
And I think, at least from my point of view, personally, I think in Indigenous Peoples Day being adopted more widely would help to improve those ideas, help to correct, rather, those ideas.
I was just talking to a group of third grade teachers about, what is my goal at the end of the school year? And you know how simple it is? That Native Americans are alive, that we're right here with you. We are your fellow citizens. Here we are. And if that's all I get across at the end of the school year, I still consider that a success.
So say somebody's watching this and they're like, okay, I never heard of Indigenous Peoples Day. And they are wanting to start celebrating it, or they are wanting to educate their family, or they are a teacher and they want to start like having those conversations. What would you suggest, or how would you suggest for those people to start?
Okay, great question. Right. The Smithsonian Institute of the American Indians has, if you go to the website, there's an entire section on education, and you could get lesson plans from there, and they can get you started. Also, in our state, in Montana, the Office of Public Instruction, OPI, has on the website our mandate, Indian Education for All. And in that, there's also instructions of how to get started. If you go to Montana State University in Bozeman and go to their website, there's an Indian Education for All subject. And it's an actual course you can take. It's just for yourself. You don't have to take a test at the end and share it with anybody, but you can read it at your leisure. And that'll tell you, of course, very specific things about Montana, but it'll also give you resources and give you a general story too about Native American and how you get started. Because as I said, I meet a lot of educators who really want to approach the subject, but are afraid of saying the wrong thing. So there's 3 resources for you. And then from there, you'll get reading resources that that the information is correct, and that'll take you from there. But that's how I would get started.
Yes, thank you so much, DG. So we're celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day here at the Idle Jorg. So look on our website, and you'll absolutely find some great things that we're showing today. There's a film showing. There's going to be a chef demonstration. If you have seen that or have registered for that, make sure you check out the website though. We also have a Spotify playlist, so you can hear Native artists today. There's a wide variety. It's very cool, so check that out.